When it comes to the Battle of Bibliophiles, there's always been tension between H.P. Lovecraft fans and Edgar Allan Poe fans. I have, of course, dabbled in both. I love the works of both of these writers, even if one of the writers is very, difficult to like because of reasons I'm sure we all are aware of. When it comes to which author has my heart, it is Edgar Allan Poe. In the end, Poe is always the one that spoke to me during my depressive episodes before I knew it was depression. But more than that, Poe's style isn't even quite gothic or horror. He's actually a dark romantic. Don't get me wrong, his works have elements of both gothic and horror, but we need to make it very clear, he is a romantic. And so when it comes to Nevermore, that dark romanticism is encapsulated very well. There is no better way to honor Poe's work than by using his work and creating a romance story out of it. And everyone knows that a romance story is immediately 10 times better when it's sapphic. And that is Nevermore. But not only that, Poe's life is a sad one. Adopted, brutally disciplined, eventually was desperate for money and had to join the military, and was perpetually struggling for money, so much so that he would go out of his way and embarrass himself begging for money from people. And both his mother and his wife died of tuberculosis, which is a disease that infects the lungs and is most notable by when you cough, oftentimes you'll see blood. And as you can probably tell, that definitely affected his writing a lot. After his wife Virginia died of tuberculosis, he wrote a poem in his grieving called Annabel Lee. Now some of you may be wondering why he didn't name it Virginia, and the reason is suspected of being, or I'm not sure if it was proved, but what I heard was he wanted to originally call it Virginia. However, either he or his editor were afraid that it would be mistaken for the state and not his wife, and so he had to eventually just change it to Annabel Lee. So in creating a romance story based around Poe's work, it is imperative that the romance needs to be strained to a certain amount. Like with the main characters, Lenore and Annabel Lee. In this story, both have died and wind up at a school in a limbo world called Nevermore. Here, both characters have lost their memory, but they still understand they have feelings for each other. They just don't know why. Lenore and Annabel are both opposites of each other. Annabel is posh, disciplined, and follows the rules. Lenore is blunt, dislikes authority, and is defiant. Usually foils are used to bring out the best in both characters. However, in this story, it actually becomes a pivotal plot point. In this school, they compete for a second chance at life. And since both of these characters are so charismatic, Lenore draws the misfits to her, while Annabel draws the overachievers. They're pitted against each other. Their first trial to suss out the weak from the determined is a maze, and the challenges in the maze are based off different forms of phobias. Quickly, they have to balance trying to get through the maze before time runs out, as well as maintain and create alliances they've made for survival. We see Lenore's character shine as she shows to everyone what kind of leader she is. Someone who refuses to leave anyone behind, a leader that lifts up everyone around her. Grit and determination are her strongest suits. However, Annabel shines by excelling. Her and the other overachievers unlock their specters, a ghostly form that grants newfound powers if the person is able to recall the feelings they had just before death. And it's with these powers that the maze becomes a breeze for Annabel, surrounding herself with other people that also excel, managing to power through the maze with an elite team. In the beginning, it's difficult to tell what Annabel's plans truly are. She seems distant from Lenore, but also goes out of her way to help her when possible. Cruel in front of others, and sweet when alone. After only barely managing to escape the maze, we learn more about Annabel and who she truly is. Annabel doesn't necessarily shine by having the strongest on her side. She's only really on the side of her and Lenore. Her plan is to use the people that follow them to get answers as to what is really going on. What they need is to play both sides so they can work to find a way to escape Nevermore. As time progresses, their memories start coming back to them. Only like a Doctor Who situation. Lenore is remembering everything from past to present. Annabelle is remembering everything from present to past. So we largely see the story unfold through the perspective of Lenore, primarily to keep the mystery of their relationship unfolding over time. Lenore was crippled and was diagnosed with hysteria, effectively giving everyone around her an excuse not to treat her like a human. Her mind slowly deteriorating, that is until Annabelle Lee came to see her. Initially meeting her to establish family connections, but we can see their relationship became more than just that while they were alive. So effectively, we have two mysteries unfolding at the same time. You have not only the memories, but the true intentions of the deans that run the school, who apparently are the ones who get to decide who gets a second chance at life, as well as who goes on to the land of the dead. So far, the story of Nevermore has a lot of allusions to Edgar Allan Poe. Like, for example, the maze. Edgar Allan Poe literally wrote a poem called Corn Maze while he was lost in a maze. And seeing as the maze holds a lot of the same themes and the same tension as, let's say, a forest, which, as we all know, a forest is a massive setting used that has a lot of meaning behind it when you see it in stories. The maze correlates with that a lot, and so it makes a lot of sense just to use a maze in the story of Nevermore. But not only that, but when it comes to the true relationship between Annabelle Lee and Lenore's relationship, Annabelle's specter is of a lady in white who died before she was supposed to marry someone, hearkening back to Poe's wife dying, and also explains why Annabelle is able to recall her memories from more present backwards. We know Annabelle Lee is the allusion to Poe's wife. But what about Lenore? In the poem, Lenore is said to be a woman who died young from falling ill, and her husband was actually very angry. He was angry that she abandoned him, left him on this damned earth, and she got the luxury of going to heaven, which is another romanticization of death, very on the nose for what we're looking for. But not only that, her husband, more importantly, her husband is angry at the other people at the funeral grieving for her. Because, as he says, they only liked her for her money. They didn't like her for her. When she fell ill, they did nothing. Which is what we're pretty much seeing with Lenore in this story as it's slowly unfolding. However, it's also stated that Lenore and her husband, in the original poem, never had the chance to be married. They were engaged. Similar to Annabelle dying before she was married. Later, Lenore talks to a raven who can speak. He acts like a sinister version of the Cheshire Cat from Alice in Wonderland. It's a chaotic neutral force that's there to talk to Lenore for its own passive entertainment. It strictly says it would eat her if given the chance. And he tells her the deans are relatively new to their job. And it's through the Raven, Lenore learns that they don't necessarily need the deans to escape Nevermore. It's only much harder to do it on your own, given that everything in this place would attempt to kill her if she tried going alone. Obviously, you can't talk about Edgar Allan Poe without talking about the Raven. But what people usually don't understand is that the order of which you're supposed to read these poems is you're first supposed to read Lenore, and then you read the Raven. But the Raven is just so titular to Edgar Allan Poe's entire works that people usually just go, oh, read the Raven, without the context of Lenore. So it's like, why would you do that? Especially when like there's so many republications of his works and collections of his works, it always starts with the Raven. And I'm like, no, I get it. Logically, yes, but also logically in another way, no. Whatever, we're moving on. The Raven is considered an omen, or a supernatural force that haunts the grieving husband of Lenore, which is why he specifically mentions Lenore in the story. And a lot of people will just go, oh, I don't know what that word means. It's probably a person, and people don't understand that there's a whole other poem that is about whatever. As he talks to the raven, he slowly starts losing his grip on reality. And he convinces himself, after talking to the raven as if it's a magic 8-ball, that according to what the raven is saying, and the raven is only saying nevermore, which literally just means never again. So you'll never see Lenore again. Will I ever see Lenore? Never again. Will I ever find love? Never again. Like, if you know what it's really cool when you read it. Me paraphrasing makes it sound really dumb, which I guess technically it is, but he's going insane. That's the point. He also convinces himself that when he dies, he will never reunite with Lenore. She goes to heaven, he doesn't. And it was written during a time when Edgar Allan Poe was struggling for money while his wife was dying. Having Lenore and the Raven be acquaintances in the webtoon Nevermore just makes perfect sense, seeing as the two poems are interconnected, as I hope I have made very clear for all the people who just were obligated to read some of Poe's works during school and never actually went off on their own to read it by themselves and never really understood the significance of the poem. I'm gonna stop. Once I stumbled on this comic, I was immediately drawn to it. And seeing how well the author utilizes Poe's work in the writing of Nevermore just made me fall in love with it. I have been avoiding webtoons for years. Now, I know there's a lot of controversy with people and like the creators of manhwa on webtoons being exploited to a certain degree, similar to anime in Japan. So like, wow, we kind of all saw that coming, which is kind of why I didn't really want to support it, but it got big and whatever, it's a losing battle. I'm going to enjoy some of the works that are on there now. It's the fact that the author had a solid understanding of Edgar Allan Poe that made me understand that this is a story that's going to pay off. And eventually, I know it's going to eventually just do its own thing. I understand if you're working with just poetry as the foundation of your story, there's a lot of room to grow and do your own thing. I fully understood that. All the writer had to do was prove to me that they had a good brain and they did the necessary research, and apparently they did. And if you are a longtime viewer of this channel and you watched my video on how modern media uses Alice in Wonderland wrong, which is actually really close to hitting 1 million views, that's really exciting. I never expected me ranting about that topic in particular would get so many people, would resonate with so many people, and so I'm hoping this, specifically, will resonate with people as well, even though I'm only singing its praise and there isn't really any anger to be thrown, even though I know technically anger performs better on the internet, which is sad, but logically I understand it. Anger is a motivator. Point is, if I have the chance to talk about classic literature in our modern media, I will. Which is why after this, I'm going to actually settle down and start working on Ever After High again. Classic literature in modern media is literally one of my favorite subjects to talk about, and listen about, and discuss. I've been avoiding webtoons forever, until Nevermore. So hopefully, this video is a strong enough recommendation for you to go, please, read Nevermore. It's decently popular, but like, come on, please. I hope you enjoyed this video. Subscribe if you're in the camp of Poe supremacy. Stay beautiful, and keep playing.